Hello and welcome to the SHIPSHAPE podcast, a series of podcasts where we meet amazing people and talk about their experiences, personal, technical, and all related to the maritime world. Come and dive in.
Today on the SHIPSHAPE podcast, we have Robert Perry. Robert Perry has been described as the godfather of the hippie generation of cruisers, and we're going to get to hear his insights and his experiences as a yacht designer in the maritime industry. Today, we also got your two co-hosts, Meryl Charette. I'm a live aboard on a Toshing Toshiba 36 in Boston, and Georgia Tyndale.
Georgia, that's me. I am a freelance journalist in the luxury yachting sphere, and I am coming from Lancaster in the UK, joining Meryl for this very exciting episode of the podcast.
So, Robert, one of the things that you're best known for is performance cruising. So what would you say the definition of performance cruising is?
Well, for so many years, cruising boats were designed for a lot of things, but performance, which is performance. Sometimes you have to be careful how you define performance. But if you define performance in an objective way, cruising boats generally weren't designed to perform well. They were designed to survive and be easy to sail, but not to go fast. And when I got into the business, it just seemed obvious to me that any boat you design has to start with good performance. And then we'll work backwards from that. And I think I was the one that came up with the term performance cruiser. And since then, it's become just an industry standard classification and applied to all sorts of boats. But I didn't invent performance cruisers. They were always out there. I just put a name on them. And, when you give something a name, it makes it easy for people to identify. So I kind of capitalized on that. But boats like, you could call a Cal 40 a performance cruiser. You could call any of the boats from the CCA era of race boats, you could call any of those boats performance cruisers. It's just that nobody did. So when I applied the term, it sort of gave the impression that I had invented performance cruisers, which is far from the truth.
So your boats, I don't think that there's another yacht designer that has made more world cruising sailboats than you. How many designs have you built and how many boats have been actually produced?
I don't know. When I started my office, I used to number my designs. I got screwed up and ended up with boats with the same number, and I finally gave up numbering them, and so I have no idea how many designs I've done. I have tried to add up how many boats have been built to my designs, and it's somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000.
Wow.
So when you were first coming into the yacht design scene, this was in the 60s and 70s, you started pretty young getting into it. You were like in 8 years old, right?
No. 14.
14, okay.
Yeah, I had to give a talk in the 8th grade in the English class, and the assignment was you had to give up and stand in front of the class and give a talk and use visual aids. And I thought, well, what the hell am I going to talk about? I thought, well, I'll talk about sailing. I'd never been on a sailboat in my life, but I don't know why I chose sailing. It just chose sailing. And I went to the library and checked out a bunch of books on sailing, and it just snowballed from there. I kept those books as long as I possibly could and tried to steal them, actually. Mm-hmm. And just by the time I was in 9th grade and turning 15, I was obsessed with yacht design. So I just kept doing it. And I have no formal education.
So who were if any, early influences on you and your kind of imagining of yacht design at the time?
Well, Bill Garden, for one. He lived in Seattle, where I lived. Phil Rhodes, Bill Tripp, Martin Stevens, Kayagi Nielsen, all the greats.
Yeah.
I wrote them all letters and told them I wanted to be a yacht designer.
Did they get back to you?
Everybody except Bill Tripp, who
Ah,
might have died before he got around to answering my letter. I mean,
selfish of him.
he did die kind of early. But I got a 2-page handwritten letter from Phil Rhodes, which I no longer have. But Bill Garden, in high school, I was not a good student. I was a poor student, and I was lucky to have my geometry teacher, who was a sailor. He saw me every period drawing boats, and he was a pretty smart guy. I mean, most teachers just wrote me off and ignored me, but he saw something, and he said, "You should call Bill Garden." And I knew who Bill Garden was because I was collecting yachting magazines, every one I could get my hands on. I had this huge stack in my bedroom of yachting magazines, so I knew who the designers were. I knew who Bill Garden was, so I called him up and said, "I'd like to come visit you." And I tell this story in my book. And my dad dropped me off one Saturday morning, and I spent the day with Bill Garden. And so for years, I sailed with Bill, and I never worked for Bill. He was going to have me come and work with him one summer, but it was my last year of high school, and he wouldn't pay anything, and I needed money to pay for college because I finally got accepted into a college, but it was the most expensive university in Seattle University, a Jesuit school. But I was going to have to pay for it myself, so I needed a job that would provide me with some money. So I played in the band. The demands and the travel schedule of the band prohibited me from working for Bill Garden. I stayed in contact with him up until he died here 15, 20 years ago, I guess.
So you were mixing rock and roll. Was it rock and roll? What type of music was it?
Oh, yeah. It was rock and roll.
Rock and roll and yacht designs. I like it.
Yeah, my band was 5 guys. 2 of us are 18, and the other guys are just turned 16. We were playing small neighborhood gigs, and we entered a battle of the bands in Seattle.
Uh-huh.
And 60 bands entered, and I entered our band. I just told the other guys, I want to see how we stack up against these other bands. Well, we won.
Wow.
And got a record contract and a management contract, and pretty soon we were driving all over the Pacific Northwest playing, which was good because I could pay for college and pay for college working at a job that I totally loved. How can you not love playing in a band? So that.
So was there a point in which it was like, okay, should I continue to pursue being a musician or get into yacht design?
No, I always wanted to get into yacht design. I can sort of remember the exact moment in my life when I thought, I don't want to be up here at 50 years old like Keith Richards. Of course, at that time, I really wasn't aware of how much money Keith Richards made, but it just didn't seem like a noble ending.
Yeah.
So it was always, yacht design was, rock and roll was always a means to an end for me.
Yeah, I was just saying that's really cool. But what was it, do you think you ever could have been a different kind of designer? Was it always boats, or did you ever think about, a different type of design?
No, but, when my family came from Australia in 1957, we were supposed to go to Phoenix, where my grandparents lived. My grandparents spent the summer in Seattle, and when we got here, they were here, and my grandfather was in poor health, so they said, we're not going to go back to Phoenix in the fall. We'll stay here in Seattle. So my family said, okay, we won't go to Phoenix. We'll stay here in Seattle. So had I gone to Phoenix, I probably wouldn't have got into yacht design. And I asked myself all the time, would you have been a residential architect? And that kind of made sense. I had grown up working in meat markets. I had my first job when I was 10 years old working in a meat market. And I worked in meat markets when I was in high school, after school. So I might have been a butcher, a good butcher. But no, I was pretty strong focus on being a yacht designer.
Yeah, very cool. And how has the obviously you did yacht design at school and all the rest of it. How has the way you were taught influenced the way you are today in terms of your early training?
I had no early training.
Yeah.
I had mechanical drawing in high school. I got kicked out of the band in high school, the school band, in the middle of the semester, and took me down to the vice principal's office and said, well, what class can we put him in halfway through the semester? And they decided they would punish me by putting me in mechanical drawing.
Oh, no.
Well, that was like throwing Brer Rabbit into the briar patch. In 2 weeks, I owned that class, and I just loved it and kept drawing. And it was actually mechanical drawing that got me into starting to draw boats, because I enjoyed the process of drafting. And I bought some drafting equipment through the help of my mechanical drawing teacher. Here I'm sitting there at home with my little drawing board and stuff. Well, what should I draw? Well, I think I'll draw a boat. And that was that.
So when you were coming around, when you were first getting into the maritime industry, it was right at like the birth of all these new boats that were coming in and the real movement of people to get on the water and all of that. So can you set the stage a little bit? It seems like it was the dawning of an era when you were coming in.
Yeah, I'd be ignorant not to recognize that timing was really important in terms of me getting into it, because it was a time when the West Sail phenomenon exploded and people buying West Sails and cruising the world or planning on cruising the world, whether they did or not, something else. It was a time where boats were not too expensive and people like school teachers could buy a boat. So all the pieces were there, and I just sort of slotted myself in with the tide of this new pursuit of going sailing. But had it been today, I look at the conditions today and I wonder how would a kid get into it. It would be very, very difficult.
Yeah, I was wondering about that actually. Do you have any thoughts on how you might get into it today as a budding young yacht designer?
Yeah, I'd be born to wealthy parents.
Right.
Or I would marry a wealthy woman.
Yeah.
Because getting into it on your own and making a living would be very difficult today.
What do you put that down to?
Oh, boy. Well, look how many boat builders there are not anymore. Look at all the boat builders that have just disappeared. So now in the United States, you have J Boats producing production boats, and they use in-house designers. They don't hire designers. They have their own designers.
Yeah.
So there's J Boats, and then there's Catalina, and they use in-house design. And that's about it, But when I got into it, there was Islander, Ericsson, West Sail, Sabre, Tartan, Morgan. You can go on and on. You could probably come up with maybe as much as 30 names of production series built boat builders.
Yeah.
So there were lots of opportunities for a designer to find somebody that would hire him. Islander hired me, which was huge. Don't know how I would have done it without Islander as a client.
Yeah.
But today, you could go to work. You could go to work for a builder as a builder's in-house design team. But if you think of all the job opportunities working for a builder like that in the U.S., it's a handful. It's just a handful.
So back in the day, would these boatyards reach out to you and basically be like, we want a design for this boat, and then they would make it a production boat? Or how did that work?
Well, I made up a client and drew a boat for this made-up client. And I had it published in National Fisherman magazine. And a guy saw it, and he called me and said, hey, I like that boat. I want a boat like that. I'm going to build it in Taiwan. And I said, well, where? Taiwan. No, never heard of it. Anyway, so he went to Taiwan, and he came back, and he said, we can build an even bigger boat than I had in mind, and I want you to design it. So I said, okay. So I charged him $750, and I designed a 54-foot boat, which was built by Dao Chow in Taiwan, and they built 100 of them. And at the same time that was going on, my best friend at the time, Nathan Rothman, he wanted to be a boat builder, like I wanted to be a yacht designer. We were the same age. We were both, these ex-hippies dreaming about what we were going to do. But he said, we're going to start a boat building company, and you're going to be the designer. And so we did. And he started Valiant Corporation. So I had the CT-54 and then the Valiant. And then we took the Valiant stuff to the Long Beach Boat Show in California and displayed it, trying to sell Valiants. We didn't sell one. But during that boat show, these guys came up one night and talked to me, and it was the president of Islander. And he said, I said to him, I was smart ass, you need a new designer, and I'm it. And he said, well, maybe. And so we started chatting, and I started sending him drawings. He said, we need a new 28-footer. Well, I got the job. That was the Islander 28, and they built 600 of them. Then I got the Islander 32, the Islander 26, the Freeport 36, and all those boats produced good royalties, really good royalties. And they were a good company to work with. And then other people would come to me and say, well, because I designed the CT-54 being built in Taiwan, when most American designers didn't know anything about Taiwan. But there was the assumption that anything built in Taiwan would be garbage. So a lot of designers wouldn't touch a Taiwan client. I didn't have the luxury of being able to turn down a new job. I didn't have the money. So pretty soon I had Taiwanese builders coming to me for designs. And a friend of mine who lived over there, he said at one point, I can't remember if it was 16 or 20, but I had between 16 and 22 different designs being built in Taiwan. Or I can put it this way, 16 to 22 designs being called Above Perry design being built in Taiwan. Some weren't, but they used my name. So here again is that perfect storm situation where I fell in right at the time that the Taiwan builders were starting to recognize intellectual property. And if I buy a design from a designer, that's my design and nobody else can build it.
Yeah.
And prior to that, they'd all sort of shared common tooling and not paid much attention to who the designer was. But when I came along, all of a sudden it became important. This is a Robert Perry design. And it just went on from there. And of course, you got a Toshiba 36. That's one of the very last boats I did for a Taiwan builder. But I did a lot of work over there.
So in your early career, in your young manhood, which I find very fascinating, it seems like a common story where you're trying to get into the industry. And, I'm sure there was this idea of like earning your salt. And you certainly made some jumps, not only with different advisors you had, but also different jobs. Like you traveled around the United States, like you were out in California, then you went out to Boston. And each one of those things was, kind of risky in a sense. How did you manage risk in your mind?
I never thought about it.
Well, that's one way of doing it.
My options are limited, and I just never considered failure. I just never thought about failing. I knew it was going to be hard. It was hard, but honestly, not that hard. I was very fortunate that I got rolling pretty quickly, but I never thought about it. Never thought about risk.
Do you have a story about earning your salt?
No. In terms of, being brought up with nothing but negative reinforcement, always being told what you can't do and what a failure you are. And I was used to, I'm 76 years old and I still struggle with it, recognizing my own ability and recognize, sometimes I look at a list, there's somewhere you can go. I think it's called Yacht Data. Mm-hmm. And they'll print out a whole list of my designs, and I look at it and I think, geez, holy cow, how did I ever do that? But Ted Brewer was a designer. When I went to Boston, I worked for Dick Carter, who was a famous raceboat designer. And I was making $157 a week take-home pay, which was almost enough to live on. So I did some moonlighting work for a designer called Ted Brewer. And Ted Brewer at one point in time referred to me as a yacht designer. And I remember thinking, well, if Ted Brewer thinks I'm a yacht designer, I must be one, because I didn't have any college degree to hang on my wall or anything else acknowledging me as being a yacht designer. But when Ted said, you're a yacht designer, that meant a lot. So that was sort of a moment. And I just went from there, stayed friends with Ted until he died not too long ago.
Was there ever a moment where you thought, I've made it? Like I'm actually doing the thing. Because I think there's a thing in business, isn't there, and all professional life. It's called Imposter Syndrome, isn't it? This idea that, I don't really know what I'm doing, or I'm just getting away with this by the skin of my teeth. Has there been a moment where you've thought, you know what, actually, I am what I am, and I am a yacht designer?
Yeah, I think it was last Tuesday.
Yeah? What happened last Tuesday?
I thought, damn, I am a yacht designer. I struggled with that. I struggled with that my whole life. I think there was an issue of, I think it was Sail magazine, and this was probably like 1979, maybe 1980, and the article was upcoming young designers on the West Coast, or upcoming West Coast young designers, something like that. Oh, I looked through it, and I wasn't on the list.
What?
And I thought, I guess I'd come up already.
Yeah.
So it wasn't upcoming, and I thought it was kind of disappointing, actually. But I got the point that, I'd sort of established myself.
Yeah.
So with yacht design, right, there's been a transition from the classic pen and paper to using computer software. How have you seen, at what point did that change? And what were the repercussions of that to yacht designers?
Yeah, I was a very good draftsman. I can really draw. And that was always important to me. And I thought the best way to sell your ideas is to have the ability to draw them well. And about the time I was getting really good at it, about 20 years ago, all of a sudden AutoCAD came along, and we were doing a boat in New Zealand, a 62-footer, and my drawings are works of art. I know that. I'd be BSing you if I said I didn't recognize that. I know they are. I've studied this all my life. I know great drawings, and my drawings are great. And then I got this call from the builder: no more hand drawings. We want everything in AutoCAD so we can convert to metric. Oh, damn. But I had a couple guys working for me, and they were drawing on AutoCAD. So all of a sudden I had to immediately transition into AutoCAD, but having the guys in the office that were already using it helped me get going quickly. How has it changed yacht design? I don't think AutoCAD is just an electric pencil. It doesn't really do anything for you. It's just a way to get your ideas down on a file, not on paper anymore. But there is software that allows you to design a hull and do all the calculations that would take you a week to do in the old days by hand. Now you can do literally in the time it takes you to press a button.
Yeah, there's artificial intelligence and everything being used in hull design by some people within the sort of super yacht sphere. There's things they're doing to make, cut out all the early calculations, as you say, so that designers can focus on the interesting bits, is what they would argue.
Yeah, maybe. But it can bring about a sameness. Yeah. Because you rely on the program to make decisions for you. When I drew a set of hull lines by hand, you know what hull lines are, the shape of the hull. When you draw that by hand, it would take a week to do a really good, accurate drawing. And by the time you were done, you were intimately familiar with every inch of that hull because you'd created that shape. Well, with the computer programs for hull design, you can draw up a section in the bow and a section in the middle and a section in the stern, and then you can have the program fill in. And so you get boats with a sameness in their shapes and hulls being drawn on the computer by guys who don't have the ability to draw it by hand. So they work with a disadvantage, knowing how lines work by hand. Oh, I'll show you. Hang on.
Yeah, show us.
You use things like this. This is called a spline, plastic spline. I have half a dozen of them of varying lengths and varying stiffnesses. And the spline is held into the shape you want by something like this. It's a 3.5 pound chunk of lead called a spline weight, although we usually call them pigs or ducks, but they're really called spline weights. And, I started buying those when I was a kid. They were $3.50 a piece. And to draw a hull, you really need 10 of them. Can't do much with less than 10, but I'd buy them one at a time as I could afford them. So those are a thing of the past. And when I get an intern, one of the things I do these days, I'm not taking any more interns, but I've had interns up until a couple of years ago. I make them start with the splines and the weights. You're going to draw a set of lines the old-fashioned way, by hand. And when you finish that, we'll go to the computer. And kids love it. They just love to get their hands on those old tools because they're never going to get them anywhere else. And it gives them an experience they'll never replicate in the professional world of yacht design these days, but they will learn things drawing by hand that they would never learn without physically doing it.
So how long does it take you to draft a design?
Oh, I don't know. Depends on the boat. Depends on how big the boat is, how complicated the boat is. I mean, the boat I'm working on right now, we had our 6 o'clock this morning Zoom meeting. It's a 53-footer. I have 3 guys working with me, the 3 guys that I picked, each with special abilities to be part of the design team. Because I live on a beach in a remote place, so having people come in to my office and work here is just not feasible anymore. So, and really with computers, not necessary anymore, right? Because we share everything so quickly. That's a huge advantage to computer design, that you can shoot something off to a builder instantly. People say, oh, you must miss hand drafting. And no, I don't. I'm 76 years old. My eyesight isn't what it used to be. And a lot of it was tedious. I don't miss it at all. If you look at my AutoCAD drawings, they're beautiful. I just treat AutoCAD like a expensive pencil. Doesn't limit me.
So I feel like with the modern software and all that, when you design a hull, you can kind of see, you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong, but you can see like how the water flows over things and all of that type of stuff. But when you were designing these yachts by hand, how did you connect like how the boat would move through the water based off of the design shape of the hull? Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Good guesses.
Well, it's like saying to a jazz guitarist, you didn't have any music. How do you know what notes to play? Right? Well, they guess. And if they're skilled, they make good guesses. You intuit. I mean, look at the fabulous boats that were designed prior to computer hull design programs. I mean, somebody was making some really good guesses. Some people were making really bad guesses. And that's one thing that we've lost the variety of shapes and types. It's a little bit like watching a golf tournament, and they're bemoaning the fact that the individual idiosyncratic golf swing was a thing of the past, because now we have sports science tell you what the perfect scientific golf swing is. So you miss swings like Lee Trevino had and Arnold Palmer had that were really personally idiosyncratic individual swings, but they worked. And in yacht design today, you tend to rely on the science, or you try to convince yourself that science is there. But if the science was right and the science was all there, all the boats would look the same. So people are still making guesses. We just make the guesses on the computer. And you can use something like computational fluid dynamics to show you how things are flowing. And that's good. Nothing wrong with that.
So with the advent of all this technology and how we've brought up the sameness of boats, do you think that is going to continue to be a trend? I mean, in the recent years, I've seen, it's probably not recent at this point, like the 2 rudders. I feel like that's a shift in the way of designing boats. Is there any more designs left out there?
Well, as long as I'm alive, there are. Case in point is look at the European production boats. Jeannot, Beneteau, yada, 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 yada. You can hardly tell one from the other these days. And I write these sailing design reviews for Sailing Magazine. So every month I sit down, right now it's two different boats a month, and I analyze the designs. And I'm at the point where I can't tell them apart. Literally, I can't. And the other day, last week, I did 2 boats, both European boats, One was like 43 feet, and the other was like 49 feet. And side by side, they were, in terms of profile and design features, they're almost identical. Almost identical. So there's this formula, sports science, right? There's this formula they're working to. Nobody has the courage to break away from that because it's going to be them against the pack of the same boats, and they all know the same boats all work. So the way forward is just another same boat rather than take a chance and do something different.
Now, you took a chance, what was it, with the Valiant 40, or which boat was it?
Well, yeah, you could say I did with the Valiant 40, took a chance. I mean, the whole that was where that whole idea of performance cruising came in, and the Valiant did not have a full keel like you have on your boat. Had a fin keel and a separate rudder, and people, oh God, everybody's going to die. You can't send people offshore on a boat like that. It's dangerous, and it just isn't done. And other designers would attack me, and I just knew it would work, and I just never questioned it. And now look at cruising boats; they're all like that. Basically.
Did you ever have a yacht design rival?
Did I have a rival?
Yeah.
All my rivals.
What is the quirkiest request for a boat design that you've received?
Probably a boat called Inbox. I did for a guy on the East Coast. He wanted a 40-foot boat, cruising boat, that could fit in a shipping container. So I was restricted to 8-foot beam and 40 feet long, and whatever the height was, I forget. But I designed a boat for him, and they built 5 of them. And, the keel comes off, obviously. And the mast had to fit in the container, and so everything was confined and constrained by the container dimensions. So that was pretty weird. I did another one that we built in China called the Flying Tiger that also had to fit in a container. So those were sort of unusual designs.
And do you have a favorite design?
Nah, they're my children.
I was going to say, or is it like deciding between children, you're not really allowed?
Well, it depends on my mood.
Yeah.
It depends on the day, and it depends on how you want to measure success. What's your most successful boat? I mean, your favorite boat would probably be the most successful boat. How are you going to measure success?
Yeah.
The boat that wins all the races, that'd be one way, but I've done race boats, but mostly just cruising boats. So success, I measure success in client satisfaction. So I have one boat that I designed in 1980 that the client kept until he died here a year ago. And when pushed to answer that question, Night Runner is the name of the boat. I will usually say Night Runner based on the fact that he always claimed they'd take his dead, lifeless body off the boat, and they did.
Okay.
So one of the things that is kind of fascinating in the realm that you're in is it comes from a long legacy of designers and artists, and it's this weird bridge of art and mathematics. Who were your, historically, who were your heroes in designing of boats and yachts and ships?
Well, Bill Garden, Phil Rhodes, Bill Tripp, K. Augie Nielsen, Sparkman Stevens, Herman Frere, Uffa Fox. There you go. You must know Uffa Fox, Georgia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Come on, Georgia. Uffa Fox. Probably the most famous British yachtsman of all time.
Nope.
Google him. He was a designer, a sailor, and a writer. And he could really write about boats, and he could really sail them. And I've sort of wanted to be like Uffa Fox. I've written for Sailing Magazine for 45 years. So I've sort of done that part of it. And plus I've designed a lot more boats than Uffa Fox. But, I studied all those guys. I mean, when you're 16 years old, you have a lot of juice. You have a lot of energy. And you can apply yourself to something in a way that a 45-year-old can't. You just physically can't do it. I mean, plus you have these brain synapses and everything that are working at that level of learning quickly, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it scientifically or medically, but physically. But you know what I mean. You'll learn a lot when you're a kid if you push yourself. So there wasn't much that got by me that I didn't pay attention to.
So, when it comes to boating and yachting, there's this romantic nature of the whole thing. What was it about boats or the water that really kind of keeps you going and doing this? I mean, you're still doing custom designs these days.
What kept me doing it?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any alternative.
But what about now? I think it's an interesting question for Merrill, because you're no longer having to, scramble, presumably, to be successful. But does that attitude stay with you even though you are, now successful? Is it a mindset thing?
Well, I'm Robert Perry, the yacht designer. I mean, that defines me. I mean, that's who I am. I don't have an option at this point, and that's my safe space. I mean, I spend almost all my waking hours in my office. I got my hi-fi here and about a dozen guitars or more, huge collection of CDs, books, 50 models on the wall. This is my comfort zone. This is where I'm comfortable.
You wrote a book, and I have it myself. What was the idea that went into deciding to write a book?
I don't remember. It was not a very good idea. It turned out to be far more work than I thought. I think what struck me was I've got so many stories, working in Taiwan and all over the world. I have so many stories, and I wanted to get them down while I remembered them. So I thought, well, I'll write a book. And I mean, I've got all the books from the other designers have written, and it was just striking me a week or two ago how we're all talking about the exact same thing. But boy, each guy talks about it very differently.
Yeah.
And there's a woohoo, look at me. And I didn't want to do that. And I didn't give it a lot of thought, but the idea I had was the element that's often missing is the role of the client. No client, no boat, no book, right? The client is just as important as a designer. And so I wanted to do a book where I would bring the client more into the picture of how the book's conceived, created, the client's role. And that's that, and just sort of getting all my stories down.
Now, there's the Robert Perry fan page on Facebook. And from what I know, you stumbled across that as quite a surprise when you first saw it.
Yeah, I thought somebody was having a dig at me.
No.
And I thought, I'm going to go check this out. And I found this nicely set up fan club, had 320 members, and you had to take a little test to get admitted.
Did you get in? Did they
I got in. I passed the test.
That's good.
Got in, and now there's over 9,200 members.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's a big part of my life. It's like an exotic plant. You have to feed it and water it and take care of it. But it's been huge for me in that with all these boats out there, like Tiana 37s, there's 600 of them. And all of a sudden, I'm collecting these photographs of boats from these people I never could have made contact with any other way other than through Facebook.
Hmm.
And that's been really rewarding and gratifying and vindicating. Look at this. Look at all these people out there with their kids. And they're sailing the world and they're having fun. And, well, maybe I do know what I'm doing. That's a huge deal. My wife thought it was silly. She didn't know I was wasting my time on it. And she became the 5,000th member of the fan club. Not that she ever goes there, but I think I said, hey, I need one more member to get 5,000. She said, I'll do it.
Fine, yeah. So what you've said before about, designs becoming more uniform, and you also mentioned the fact that you used to do kind of, have interns and see the younger generation. How do you see the future of yacht design in terms of, do you view it optimistically or pessimistically or somewhere in the middle, or what do you think it is?
I don't think about it. I'm too busy to think about things people are paying me to think about, to fantasize. And I'm 76. I got 5 more years left. promised my dog I'd never leave her.
Yeah.
And she'll probably go another 5 years. And when she's gone, I'm out of here.
What kind of dog?
Portuguese water dog.
Oh, I'll have to look that up because I don't know the breed.
Same kind of dogs that Barack Obama had.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're related to poodles.
Oh, they are cute.
Yeah, they're cute.
Oh, how
Smart,
big?
50 pounds. They were Portuguese fishermen's work dogs. So they're ideal for life on a boat. And she's right there. She's my constant companion. I don't think about the future. I worry about how kids are going to get into it. One of my interns, Daniele Fournier, an Italian intern, he pestered me for 2 years. I told him, I'm not taking any more interns. No more interns. And finally, okay. So he came over. I have to live at the house. There's no place he can live and commute here. So he lived here, and he went back, and he struggled to get a job in Italy. But now, for the last probably 5 years, he's working with these huge cruise ship companies. He's all over the world. I mean, literally all over the world. And I think he supervises modifications in the cruise ships. I had another intern. His father contacted me and said, hey, my kid wants to be a yacht designer. Will you talk to him? And I said, sure. So I talked to the kid, and he was about 14 at the time. And he started sending me drawings, and I would comment on his work and give him corrections. And he was a smart kid and seemed to take instruction pretty well. I finally said to the father, we've gone about as far as we can go with this. You need to send him over here. Well, they were in Panama cruising on their Hallberg Rossi 42, doing a circumnavigation. So he stuck the kid on a plane, and the kid flew up here. He was 15, and he lived here at the house again, and I worked with him. He graduated from high school, and then he applied in the UK at Southampton, and he got in. And normally they required a year sort of prep for foreign students before they let you into the yacht design program. But based on the work he'd done interning with me, they waived that year. And he graduated number one in his class.
Wow.
And he came back and did an internship up in Anacortes, which is an hour away from me, Jim Bett's boatyard. And he did his internship. And then when he graduated, he just said, hey, look, I'm coming back to the Pacific Northwest. He got a job with Jim Bett's at the boatyard, and he's still there. And he's one of my team members on the new Motor Sailor project. He's doing all the 3D modeling work for me. So there are opportunities for interns, but not many.
It sounds like you have to be pleasantly persistent.
Yeah, you do. You have to be focused and not give up quickly.
Can you tell us about the motor yacht that you're designing?
Oh, I sent you a drawing. It's for a client on the East Coast who has a Valiant 40, and he's 10 years younger than I am, but he's looking into the future and thinking he's going to need an old man's boat. And he's got a Portuguese water dog, and he needs a boat that's more suitable for the dog, easier for the dog to get around on without any help. He had seen a boat I had designed for Emil Doppiera. Does that name ring a bell?
No.
Doppiera. Think music. Doppiera. Think dobro.
We're just ignorant over here.
You know what a dobro is?
What is it?
It's a musical instrument.
Oh.
You heard it 1,000 times. It's a guitar that you turn up flat in your lap, and you play it with a bar. You don't push the strings down. It's like a steel guitar, right?
Yeah, I can see you.
Yeah. And this guy came to me, Emil Doppiera. His father and uncle invented the dobro. But he wanted an old man's boat. So I drew a boat for him called Gypsy, and then he died before we could build it. And then my current client on the East Coast saw that boat. He said, I want a boat like that, but I want it bigger and different, but that style of boat. So we are working on that, and it's next month we're going to send it out to some boatyards up in Maine and get some prices.
Now, here's a good question. How have, obviously when you do a custom design for a boat, then after that is the process of trying to find a boat builder. How has boat building changed over time? Has it become more difficult to find them, or?
Yeah, I'd say so. There's fewer yards. There's just fewer boat builders now. And people think Pacific Northwest is a hotbed of boat builders. It's not. There's really one building a custom sailboat. There's one yard in the Pacific Northwest, and that's Jim Betts in Anacortes. There's Schooner Creek down in Portland. They're 3 hours away. Jim Betts is 40 miles north of my beach shack, so it's exactly 1 hour drive. So that's very convenient. I did four carbon fiber cutters, all for one client. I did those up at Jim Betts' yard. But custom boat builders in California have dried up. The last good one down there was Westerly Marine, and they shut their doors about 2 years ago. I mean, they didn't go out of business. The guys that owned Westerly were my age, and they had a heck of a run of continually building these beautiful custom boats. And I think they just said, let's retire. They shut the door and went away. So they built about half a dozen boats for me, but I can't go there anymore because it's gone.
Now you're looking towards Maine?
Yeah, which is not an hour drive away for me.
Yeah, a few hour plane ride.
All day.
Well, as we wrap this up, what are some bits of advice you would give someone that would be seriously considering coming in and trying to, become a yacht designer?
Get a degree in mechanical engineering or materials engineering, some kind of engineering. Get a degree in a field where you can get a job not in the yacht business, so you can fall back on that. And then get a degree in an area where what you learn there is applicable to yacht design, so that you know as many bullets in your gun as you can fit, right? Because it's going to be a little rocky.
Yeah, it sounds like a very long and arduous road to go down.
I guess.
Georgia,
I'm glad I'm not trying to do it today, but when you're young, you think you're going to live forever. You think you can do anything, right? And so you asked me about the risk thing. Hey, look, think of the things you did when you were 16 years old. You didn't know what the word risk meant. You should be dead. I should be dead several times for things I did, but you just think you're invincible. And so that's, like I said, failure's not an option. I read Ron Holland's book. Ron Holland,
mm-hmm.
Kiwi designer.
Yes.
And he was asked that same question about risk, and he just said, what risk? He said, it was never an option, never considered it. He was going to succeed. End of story. And I thought, a little light went up in my head. I thought, yeah, I remember that. So
an unconquerable willpower.
Yeah, you need willpower. I started working with this kid who's 8 years old in Australia, and his dad put us together. A cute little kid. Well, he'll probably be a yacht designer. He's turned into a really good competitive sailor. But he was building his own designs when he was 10 years old. I mean, sort of crude boats, but there was a class of boats down there that he designed a boat to fit in his class. And, he put foils on one of his boats. Of course, it didn't work at all, but he tried. But we'll see him around. Yeah,
we've covered loads. And thank you so much for coming to talk to us. It's been really, really insightful. I need to start sketching now by hand.
Yeah. My advice to kids is draw a lot of boats.
Yeah.
just keep drawing.
And then bring them to designers and get them to look at them for you in a pleasantly persistent way.
I did. I never missed it. When I was a kid, I never missed a chance to visit another yacht designer's office. When I was in the band, we were playing down in San Diego for a couple of weeks, and I just walked the docks and visited other designers, and it was just a long-haired guy without a chance in hell of ever making it as a yacht designer. But I didn't let that stop me from taking my work around and asking for advice.
So, Bob, where can people find you and read more about your materials and hear what's going on?
Fan club page would be a good place.
Awesome. I'll make sure to include that link.
Yeah, there's something going on there every day. Awesome.
Well, it was amazing to talk to you, Bob. And it's always amazing to talk to a legend in the industry.
Yeah. I don't know about that legend stuff. I'll leave that to you guys.
Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure, Georgia. Okay, Meryl, it was fun.
Perfect.
I'll see you later.
Check back every Tuesday for our latest episode, and be sure to like, share and subscribe to SHIPSHAPE.pro.